Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I wanted to welcome you to the annual DTC Digital Transformation Council meeting associated with the ARC Forum. My name is Todd Anslinger. I work for Chevron. I've been on the steering committee of the DTC for 2 years now. And I just want to welcome you. And I also want to say, what I've gotten out of being on the DTC is you get to hear a lot about what other people are doing as far as implementing digital projects. And that's good, but the thing that I've really gotten the most value from is hearing how people are implementing the digital projects in their organizations. And that really helps us to know how to scale them and take them to the next level within our own business. So today I'm going to go over the agenda real quick. And talk about the ground rules. And then we're going to go to the DTC status and 2021 progress. And then we're going to have a portion on the 2021 election process for the steering committee members. And then we're going to go into a panel we're going to talk about resiliency and adaptability in the era of transformation. And we're going to have open discussion and Q&A after that panel or during that panel. And then for the last part, we're going to vote on the 2021 research projects that we want the DTC and ARC to look into. And then we'll wrap up and have closing remarks. So now on the antitrust checklist, this is what we want to use for guidance for our meetings here. So we'll start on the do side, and I'm not going to go through all of this. You can see the link at the bottom and go through the detailed ones. But mainly just going to summarize here. We want to have an ARC member at each of the DTC sponsored meetings. We want to limit the meetings to the agenda topics. We want to try to minimize the rabbit trails that go on. And then of course, we want everyone to have a copy of this checklist so you can know ahead of time what to expect. And also, as far as the vigilance, we want to give you guys the freedom to have stop work authority. And if there's anything we're going down a rabbit trail we should not be talking about, raise your hand and say, hey, we need to divert the topic or the subject, or you can feel free to dissociate yourself from this. Now on the don't side, this is what we're looking at mainly to be thinking of as we're going through here, is we don't want to talk about any individual company price changes, discounts, multipliers, allowances, even credit terms we have with vendors. We don't want to talk about any company data on production, capacity, inventories, and sales. On the production side, we don't want to talk about plans of entering new territories or producing new products. We want to stay away from the changes that we may have in production capacity or inventories. And we don't want to talk about transportation rates, such things like zone pricing, freight pricing, that type of stuff. And then on the market procedures, we don't want to talk about bids that you have with certain vendors or for contracts on projects, or even procedures to how to approve those. And then since this is all an end user group, there's no vendors in this group. So we want to make sure we stay away from talking about vendors in a way that could impact their business to the negative for sure. So we want to make sure we stay away from those things. And of course, like I said, you can go to the link at the bottom here and on the ARC web, and you can see the detailed list of all of the antitrust checklists for the DTC. So now we're going to go on to Greg. So Greg, take it away.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Todd. And thanks for helping us out for a couple of years here. So that's been great.
You're welcome.
So I'm Greg Gorbach, and I head up a group of analysts here at ARC, and I'm also the head of our Digital Transformation Council activities here. So I'm a steering committee member as well. And I just want to take a few minutes today to talk about the Digital Transformation Council and where it is. So, So the mission of the ARC's Digital Transformation Council is to enable professionals to keep abreast of many emerging technologies and business trends, to learn from others on similar journeys, both what's working and what's not, and to leverage these trends and technologies to achieve transformational growth. And I have to say, we started this a few years ago at the request of our user community, who said, this meeting every year in Orlando is really a good thing, and we love to be able to network with each other and sort of learn what's real and what's going on. But can we do it more frequently? Can we find another way? So that's why we started the Digital Transformation Council. And so this year we can't even do the Orlando version of this meeting, but hopefully by next year we'll be back to doing that. So and we launched it as I mentioned a couple of years ago in 2018 at the ARC Industry Forum. We've had quite a bit of growth since then. We represent over 175 companies and across 18 different industries, and it's about 1,000, a little over 1,000 members to date as well. So that's been growing quite rapidly. We have a meeting every month, except in February our meeting is normally a live meeting. This year it's virtual again, but thanks for coming. We've created a kind of a subgroup now called DTC Asia, which has been growing quite a bit. So just to sort of focus on local issues and of course the time difference, we're also conducting monthly webinars for the DTC Asia group now. Same kind of model that we've been using for our main DTC meetings. We had initially, before COVID year, we started having some regional meetings, and when it's appropriate, we'll start doing some of those again. We've done some in Houston and Calgary in Germany. We've done a virtual digital twin workshop this year, which was well attended and quite interesting. And then we, of course, another benefit of the council for members is access to our website, where there's some members-only exclusive content. I mentioned about the DTC Asia group, so let me introduce you to Virtual Bob Gill, who's going to just talk about it briefly.
The Digital Transformation Council Asia, DTC Asia, which was launched in November 2020, is a natural extension of the Digital Transformation Council. That is especially so when you consider that Asia is home to 60% of the world's population and is responsible for 40% of the world's manufacturing output. And that's a figure that's set to rise further with increasing industrialization that's happening right across this region. And with Asia home to 6 out of the world's 10 most populous cities, there is great interest in how such places can become more livable through the deployment of smart city technologies. DTC Asia, which is held by the ARC Advisory Group offices in the region, shares the ethos of the Digital Transformation Council of being the place to connect, collaborate, learn, and share with peers who are digitizing and transforming their organizations. And we've already seen great interest in becoming part of the DTC Asia community, with almost 200 end users joining in just over 3 months, together with active participation and excellent attendance in our monthly webinars. Those webinars have covered topics such as open process automation, digital twins, and industrial 5G. And during the rest of 2021, we'll be holding monthly online events, all with end user input and end user representation. And we'll examine not only the details of exciting new digital technologies, but also how they can be best applied within the organizational context to realize successful digital transformation. So if you are an industrial end user located here in the Asia region, I would really encourage you to become a DTC Asia member, which you can do by going to the Digital Transformation Council page on the ARC website. So I do look forward to you joining us and becoming part of DTC Asia.
All right, great. Thanks, Bob.
The Digital Transformation Council.
Here we are. Okay, next I just wanted to touch briefly on some of the kinds of things we talked about in our monthly meetings in 2020. So the basic model that we have is that we use our annual meeting, today's meeting, to vote on topics of interest to everyone, and then we try as best we can to accommodate those during the year. Of course, we sometimes adapt a little bit as particular hot button issues pop up. But this year, I think we had a pretty good program. So we talked about blockchain and industrial IoT Edge 2.0. We had presentations from Rolls-Royce and Johnson & Johnson and Dow and Philip Morris International and Chevron and Owens Corning and the European Chemical Industry Council to help us with a number of other topics this year. And we like to use that model quite a bit during our monthly meetings. For those of you who haven't been there, we have we call it a council chronicle, a user story where we learn about how one company is dealing with one of these topics. And then we have an open discussion period, and we open up the microphones and let you know, of course, questions for the speaker, but also we encourage folks to share what their own companies are doing and have a dialogue as best we can. So we try to accommodate that initial request of, hey, can we find a place where we can come together and share ideas? And that's what we try to do in our monthly meetings. So today we're going to do a little bit of interactive polling. We're going to use a SurveyMonkey tool to do so. And you know, you don't need to do it here. I just put these here for example, but we're going to be able to use you know, either scan the QR code with your phone or type in a URL, or we'll put the link in a chat. Maybe one of my colleagues can make sure we put the link in the chat at the appropriate time. So we're going to use this polling for two purposes in today's meeting. We're going to take nominations for the steering committee. So if you're interested in joining us as a steering committee member, we'd love to have you submit your name. If you know someone else who wants to be in it, or you think would be really good for us to have participate, you can nominate it in the same form, and we'll reach out to them and check it out. Second, we're going to just, as I mentioned, we like to get a sense of what topics everyone's interested in. So we're going to use a survey to let you pick the topics of most interest to you as well. So we'll do that. We'll do that in a little while later in the meeting. Our plan for 2021 is to continue our online meetings in a monthly way. We do them on the second Tuesday of each month at 11 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time. Our January meeting that we've recently completed was on augmented reality, and that one was well received and quite interesting. And then the next meeting scheduled for March 9th is succeeding with IT/OT organizational convergence. As we've seen, this year's forum is a little different, but we're, you know, we think it's going to be quite interesting anyway. So it's 3 parts. The digital transformation in industry part is the main focus for this week, and then next week we have kind of 2 parallel tracks, one for supply chain and logistics and one for energy and cities. In any case, if you're attending today, then hopefully you figured out how to get to the meeting and how to get through our platform. It'll be the same thing for next week as well. And this meeting and the rest of our sessions are going to be recorded and made available to attendees. The users, this particular meeting and any other users only meetings will the recordings will only be available to attendees as well, to user attendees as well. So with that, the one last thing is that we're planning to introduce a new report in 2021, and it's going to be an interesting one, we think. The Digital Transformation Top 25, the plan is to identify some top industrial companies who are leaders in digital transformation. And we're going to put this together based on company performance and ARC analyst team opinions and some industry expert opinions as well. So, we're going to focus on digital transformation, obviously, for the top 25, and look at things like technology integration and culture and leadership, operation agility, workforce engagement, and customer experience. Okay, so with that, those are the main business items that I wanted to cover today. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mark Sengupta.
Oh, sure you are. Hold on. Okay, so there's my video. So Mark Sengupta, I've been with ARC since about 2013, and I am also a steering committee member. Been a steering committee member for about a year now. So let's go through the next topic, which is DTC policies and for the elections. So the elections for DTC, we normally conduct it at this time at the forum, and the idea is to develop the successes for this, and for you, by having a broad representation of the membership and of the industry on the steering committee. So we generally have an ARC lead, 2 or 3 reps, which I'm one of them, from ARC, and then 4 to 8 representatives from the user community. The steering committee meets every other month, and there's ad hoc feedback during or in between. So that's the amount of work required or expected. These are the current steering committee members from the user community. Most of them are, I think we're missing 1 person online or 2 people online today, but these, at least you can put a name and a face together. But you'll see that we've got Covestro represented, we've got Praxair, Chevron. So we've got chemicals and manufacturing here, General Mills, and what we would normally consider both process and discrete members. And we want to shoot for the same diversity in the representation. So hopefully, we've got, you've got some people coming to mind. Maybe you're in a different industry. You think there might be somebody that wants to be or would make a great contribution as a member. We want to hear about them. Please, nominate them. We'd love to hear about them. These are the 4 people from ARC, and Mike will be speaking on the panel, and then Valentin Delou, he's in Europe. And then you've heard from Greg, and you're unfortunately hearing from me now, but that's okay. So the election cycle, this is the schedule that we're going with. So today, we're having the meeting. You've got the link, and it'll be coming up again with the QR code. You can go online. You can submit your nominations. There will also be an email with the link to the online form coming out in a couple of days. We're going to close the nominations on Valentine's Day, and then we're going to verify that the people nominated actually want to be on the committee, and then they'll go through the election process. We'll have that all tabulated by the end of the month. So if you'd like to nominate somebody, you'll when you click on the link, you'll see this data entry form at the top of the survey, and you put the name, company, and email address for that person. Okay, and this is the link and the QR code. I don't know if somebody put the link in the chat window yet, but I'm going to assume so.
Just did that, Mark.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to leave the QR code up there for a little moment so you can get your camera ready if that's how you decide you want to do it. It's probably best to do this today while it's top of mind, because tomorrow you may forget to do it. So that might be something to keep in mind. Okay. All right. All right. With that, we're going to move to the next part of the the meeting, and that's the Council Chronicles panel. And for that, I'm going to turn this over to Mike Guilfoyle.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Let's see here. Just 1 second here while I get this going. Okay, so today's panel, let me just flip this so I'm looking at you. There we go. So today's panel, we're going to talk about resiliency and adaptability, and really focus on a lot of what went on last year, and hear from some of our steering committee members, Jane Arnold and Brian Pearlstein, in terms of what they experienced. And that's just going to really lead the conversation. As always, where we get the most value out of the DTC is when people participate. So we do want this to be an open discussion, similar to what we do every single month. Just to let you know, if you want to participate, please use the Q&A to ask speakers questions, or if you want to, you can unmute yourself and join in the conversation as well. Please use the Q&A if you want to type something in versus the chat, because that way we'll know that it will pop up. So to get things rolling, I really want to focus on 3 areas initially in terms of what went on last year, and really what happened in terms of focusing businesses on resiliency. And I think amazingly how well companies were able to adapt to the circumstances that the pandemic forced upon them. We're going to look at really 3 things. The first is just the general impact to work, with the idea that not as many people could be in manufacturing plants, nor could they be in offices, and what happened there. And also to look at the mental toll, which I think really shouldn't be overlooked or understated. There's a lot of employee apprehension in terms of job security, health, and really what that looked like, and how people dealt with that apprehension and overcame it. And also just look at digital rollouts in general and the impact of the pandemic on the adoption of digital technology. So what I'd like to do here is turn it over to Brian Pearlstein and Jane to kick off the conversation. So Brian, Jane, take it away.
Great, thank you, Mike. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, thanks. So, want to thank everyone for joining, and this is going to be an interactive conversation. We don't want it to be Jane and myself and Mike just talking the whole time. So again, please join in when we reach out, ask questions. So I think as we start this, Jane, one of the first things we started talking about was how this pandemic really was, this spark that ignited the digital transformation, and do we really think that holds true? And I know when I look at what's going on with where I work, and even other companies and people and my peers that I've talked to, they all agree that this actually is that spark. We've really shifted from that, how do you say, a lot of talking about it, people saying, oh, we're really interested, oh, we really need to do this, or pilots that really didn't go anywhere, and got people to kind of to recognize that, oh my God, with the pandemic, all of a sudden, people could no longer travel. You couldn't even have all the normal resources that traditionally would be in a plant, would be in the plant, right? So all of a sudden people were starting to figure out, well, how do we work? How do we support our manufacturing operations? And they started thinking, really started to reach out to, the digital organizations and the, different advanced manufacturing organizations in our teams to really say, hey, what can you do? How can you help us? We can't get people on site, but we have to maintain operations, or we've got these new commissioning going on. What can you do? And that, and it changed some of even how they asked questions. It started getting, looking back at what are the right questions to ask, instead of saying, hey, we really need to do augmented reality, or we really need to do digital work instructions. It's more, hey, we really need to be able to support our operations and have access to subject matter expertise when people can't be on site. How can we do that? What can we do to make that happen? And it really enabled us to jump and find solutions that really fit that. And in a rapid fashion, make that happen. In 4 or 5 months, we deployed out a smart glass solution and got that out there. But it also drove the way people also thought about how they use information and data. And we're seeing a lot more pull from the businesses to say, hey, we need to make decisions better. We no longer can do things the way we had, right? It really exposed these needs and gaps that people were able to kind of work around before, when they could just pull people in or people could travel. Now they can't. And, in my opinion, this has been really good because it's helping us drive better thought processes. It's helping us and helping the businesses ask the right questions and helping us identify the right solutions to help move our companies forward with the right tools. And I'm really curious though, do you guys feel the same way? Do you feel that this was a spark?
So I can say at Covestro, it definitely was a spark, because you hit a lot of the topics there. When the pandemic first started, we made some improvements in our IT infrastructure. And then the sites were all looking for some sort of support. And on my team, we were at the beginning of rolling out a new solution. And I really at first thought, oh, well, we're not going to make the kind of progress that I thought we should have. But what I ended up seeing was like this exponential growth in improvements. And just like you said, Brian, the site started to pull. How do we get support? They accepted, immediately this online support and made a lot of progress in what we're doing. And I think we accomplished things much faster than we would have otherwise.
Hey, Jane, Brian, I want to throw it out to the two of you, but of course, anybody else that wants to jump in, please do so. You mentioned it, I think, early on, Brian, about how the pandemic changed the questions you asked. How did that really, how did that come down to technology, for example? Because you gave a great example of saying, it wasn't just about, hey, let's do this, use this technology, but the questions had to be about what are we trying to accomplish, and then how did that lead into really your look at different technologies and how you might employ them?
I think some of what we saw is we actually stopped a lot of the third-party support and relied on our own people more, and asking the people how do we do it better, and really getting them engaged. And since most of the people we were interfacing with were also stuck in some sort of virtual environment, then we ended up having a better conversation. So it was really quite interesting from that regard.
Yeah, I agree with you in that having the right conversation, it's not about the technology. In fact, a lot of times now, especially now, we're really pushing back and saying, stop leading with the technology, stop throwing the technology at us. Let's have a conversation about what are your problems. And with the pandemic, what it really did was it realigned our leadership across our businesses to actually, because they recognize the need to make these behavioral changes, this new focus on this new way of working and continue this new way of working that we've really had to put in place. It really forced them to pull the resources out and make them engage and take ownership for helping to solve the problems, or I should say, identify the actual problems, be able to ask that right question, and then allowing us to go and find the right solution.
Yeah, so it was the same for us too. I mean, it really just, throwing technology at something, it doesn't solve the problem. You have to have proper engagement. And this method that we have with everything being online actually enabled that engagement even more than it had before.
I mean, does anyone else has seen anything or, agree, disagree? Like, what do you guys out and in the audience really think about this? Because we want this to be, a broader conversation.
Yep, I see somebody, Keith, you want to mention something? I see that you made a comment. You can unmute yourself and input your comment.
Yeah, Brian, Jenny, Micah, all good comments, and I guess we do look at this as a kickstart, or at least a spike in the utilization of digitalization. you know, from my standpoint, do you view it as, from your perspective and your company's perspective, did you view it as more of an impact, a positive impact from a collaboration standpoint? Or, you know, how about from an impact from a productivity or a manufacturing production standpoint, or both? And then the second comment I'll make, I mean, one of the things that y'all were just talking about that really comes to mind for me and what we did at BASF, is we had the tendency during the pandemic, due to the need of how quickly everybody transferred from a on-site perspective, boots on the ground, to a remote perspective. We introduce some technology, maybe not, you know, really giving it a good risk assessment, and therefore it's there now. So it's been provided to the masses. And my concern continues to be with my team talking to them is, you know, once you give something to the masses, it's a little hard to pull it back after a while and try to do it correctly. So once they have something that really works well for them, so, you know, I guess in essence, to sum it up, I mean, I have some concern in that area as to how quickly we had to engage and provide certain functionalities from a remote perspective. And right now it concerns me because I look at a couple of them and it probably wouldn't have been the way I'd have went if we would have did a little bit more thorough analysis.
So I think when you look at your statement first on collaboration, it definitely, I think, changed how we collaborate, and in some cases improved it. Yeah, there are challenges still because everybody is remote, and you know, sometimes I think when we're all on conference calls and we don't turn on our video, we're multitasking. So one thing to do is to make people use their video. So you have to be more engaged, because if you're sitting there and looking at your phone, or you're sitting there doing something else, people can see that and kind of potentially call you out. But going back to I think the one thing I wanted to highlight is your comment about deploying something quickly and not being in the best way, and then, like, you know, having people adopt it and being able to pull it out. I find, and I found even in past jobs, many, you know, some of the careers I had and some of the deployments I've done in past, that if you get something out to people quickly to help solve a need, to help them, you know, do their jobs, and with the comment that, hey, we're going to continually iterate it, right? When the first time they get it, they may not be everything they want, but it helps them do their job. And they pull and keep pulling, right? But they're more open to those iterations, that continuous improvement that will get it to that more sustainable outcome, that more resilient outcome, potentially more secure outcome. You know, when we're deployed out the smart glasses, would it be the way I would want to do it? No. I mean, we're deploying it out with MiFi hotspots out to our plants, and, you know, it's not the best way of connecting, and, you know, there's frustration level like that, but it did help them, and it does help them do their job and help them get access to the subject matter expertise that are located globally for our company. So, and even some of our vendors who can't travel. So is it the best? No, I prefer it be on the network, and I prefer a lot of other things, but, you know, we got to start somewhere. And, you know, I think if you give them something quick and show them that you're going to iterate, they're going to be more open to that change. Jane?
I think I'd like to add something to that, Brian. I agree completely. You have to start somewhere. I mean, getting started is really the most important thing. If you wait for a perfect solution, then you'll never get started. And what we did with ours is we actually, you know, had like a version 1 that we put out to a few places, and people started to give feedback. And the version 2 that we have now is actually significantly better, because we took all those end users and took that feedback and incorporated it in. And this makes them want it more. When they're actually co-owners and part of the solution, it makes them really get engaged. And so the collaboration that you mentioned was greatly improved. And I think our productivity is improved. Now, when we look at the productivity at the sites, we can't measure that yet because we're still at the beginning of the rollouts, but it's been pretty good so far.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
And do you think?
I'm sorry, I was just going to add one more thing in. I think, Brian, exactly what you were saying. I relate to that, the exact example, because some of what we, you know, attempted to do is give that capability out in the field to where you could use a remote expert to help troubleshoot something. And it's exactly the same way. I mean, we implemented it quickly, which means we went out there and we basically had hotspots, big people carrying MiFis out there to accomplish this. And it's not really how we want to do it. There are technologies that we want to use, but given the circumstances, and it's just a matter of which, it's going to be interesting to kind of follow as we try to, migrate what we rolled out to make it better. What hiccups any of us experience as we start to make those changes.
And Keith, I was actually going to, Mike was going to ask you about the point in particular, what you described, the second bullet here around employee apprehension, it's not just about the pandemic itself, but, new ways were somewhat forced on people. And with operations being so risk averse, it's having a comfort level with what I think is a pretty common a common theme with IT, which is you roll something out, you figure it out, you improve it, you move on. Brian, which you talked about, and Jane, I think you mentioned it too, which is you're going to have to iterate, you're going to have to get better. I just wonder, Keith, with the folks that you were dealing with, how much of it was just a discomfort with that idea that things aren't fixed from the get-go and that you got to figure things out on the fly. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, and we had our hiccups. I mean, as we started to roll different things out, we'd have a hiccup here or there. And then you had two opposing sides, to be honest, Mike. You had the one side from the technical end, where people, that were being forced to stay at home, but needed to be able to assist the production unit. We were given, certain levels of remote access into it. And then if you had a glitch or something that occurred as you were setting these things up, of course, you had the production people and operations people yelling at you, "Hey, man, let's not do this anymore." That was kind of scary. And so it was a balance of trying to work with that, the people actually still physically on the site from a manufacturing standpoint, being able to provide them with the help they needed during the pandemic. And, we're still doing that today. But starting to roll things out that maybe we wasn't quite fully ready for as far as the version we rolled out, and just dealing with those hiccups. It presented some challenges because we wanted to keep things rolling. We wanted to keep people being able to interface into the production units. But at the same time, we're gonna, and that's what I told some of the manufacturing leaders in the region is, we're gonna hit these things. Our goal is that we don't hit something that actually causes you lost production. We might have a hiccup to where somebody's doing something and they're unable to do it. But by saying, our main focus is does not interrupt your production. And I think once we were able to spread that around, we got a little bit more of support even when we had the hiccups.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think it's just one of those things that, the thing that I think I heard a lot from folks is really about the pandemic added clarity, clarity to what's important, what's not, how you improve things, how you protect things that you can't compromise. Francisco, you typed in a question here, a comment. Do you want to unmute yourself and jump in with that? I think it's related to the point that we're making here. So Francisco, if you can unmute yourself.
You should be able to now.
Okay.
Okay, now I unmute. Hello.
There we go. Yep.
What I'm trying to talk about is, even though you can do many things now with in remote mode, there are so many other things that you need more contact with people, and that's very hard to do it just through Teams or Skype or whatever type of communication you may have. So I think we need some other tools when you have to put in service a new system or a new application. And that's not really, I think we don't have right now good tools to do that, even though you can install the system, install the application. That's my point.
Can I put it out to the group? Francisco, you make a good point. So we have tools, we have things that we're doing that we believe are making improvements, but there's still work to be done. Did you find that the vendor community had the same sense of clarity that you did in terms of focusing on the business needs, or did you see them still default to the same old, hey, buy this, it's the greatest thing ever? What happened there? I'm really curious as to that one.
I mean, I think, a lot of businesses try to take advantage of the situation and say, look, you can't be on site. Oh, we have this pandemic. You really need these. And well, some of these businesses, vendors did some great things like offering, these remote expert tool free, a lot more flexibility in some pieces. They still, at the end of the day, kept trying to drive you into this tool without really fully understanding the broader problem or challenges that we're facing. And I think, having this opportunity has really opened up people's eyes within our company to say, hey, we don't just need to go jump at this one tool, or we don't need to, we need to look at what is our problem and what information, what data, what knowledge do we need to be able to capture, in order to improve our manufacturing operations and grow our manufacturing operations.
Right. So we had a variety of responses or actions from the vendor. With a couple of the startups, it was all hands on deck, doing whatever they could to make sure that we were successful in using their software. Others, maybe not so much. And then some of the bigger vendors, they were a little bit more hands off and not really getting involved. I even had one vendor send me a note in writing about all the great accomplishments that were made during the plague, right? That this is the time to make changes, which I found amusing. But when you get back to the collaboration topic with operations, at all of our sites, we have local teams who will go out to the site and support if there's a need. And so if we needed some support with using a tool or something, then we would have some people, hands on deck out there actually doing it. So it ended up being like a hybrid model. Not so many people at the site. It was primarily online, but we did have that possibility to help bridge the gap.
Did you find that, and Keith, you mentioned this a little bit, and Jane, you bring up this point, which is you had folks that were local that could help or could handle the problem or really tackle the issue that needed to be resolved. Did that, when you talk about this convergence of skill sets that are necessary, where you have to have more of an agile mentality around how you use and deploy technologies, how you problem solve, did you start to see changes to your teams, or did you simply take the team and say, this is what you got to deal with? I guess my what I'm trying to get to is, do you see this starting to change how those people's skills will evolve at the local level, or with you've got distributed teams that are helping them? What was the change there, or was there any? And do you think it will be permanent?
I think it's going to be permanent, personally. So when we have someone go out to the site to help with something, I think the operators, just my opinion, probably prefer not having management on site. So they will do what they can to get up to speed on things.
So true.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of the people on the site, I mean, there's always going to be those who resist, but it's a mix. There's maybe half the people who want to learn it and do more and have more flexibility with their position.
Hey, Mike, if I could just interrupt here for a second. We are getting a couple of questions in through the chat, so if you could pay attention to that a little bit, that's good. But also, I'd just like to remind everybody, we'd love to have you to just jump in. To do so, the best plan is to raise your hand. Just click the little symbol at the bottom, and then we can unmute you, and then you'll still have to unmute yourself, and then you can jump in and join our conversation, which we'd love for you to do. So thanks, Mike.
Sure. Actually, so sorry, thanks for pointing that out with the chat. So it looks like we've got a couple comments. Pietro, my friend, you want to unmute and jump in there? I see you've got a comment. You want to unmute yourself and weigh in?
Mike, can you point again? Who should I unmute?
Pietro Valsecchi.
I cannot find the name.
Okay. Well, Todd, if you want to jump in, because I know you've got some comments on what you were doing with HoloLens. And I think you can unmute yourself, Todd.
Yes, I just wanted to say that based on what Brian had said right at the beginning, it's the pandemic has pushed the use of things like HoloLens, Remote Assist, or Remote Expert, because we couldn't travel to places to do FATs on, you know, platforms and such, and they actually just mailed a HoloLens, and the guy put it on and ran through the things and did an FAT remotely. So that's pushed that, accelerated that for sure. Now on the IoT sensor side, you know, while we went through a dip because some contractors were installing them, now it's kind of changed our plan to where we want to make it to where an operator can just plop it on, hit the button and walk away. And so it's kind of changed it to where we're planning on our resources installing those things. So it's kind of helped push us in that direction, which it's a better total cost of ownership anyway. You don't want to pay someone 5 times the cost of the device to go install that cheap device.
And that's pretty interesting, because that, by the very nature of what you're doing and how you're doing it over time, will change the skills necessary for that person to do work.
Right, and that's,
yeah,
that's going to be a huge benefit.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated in kind of those craft skills gaps, and how digital technology is really the equalizer there. So Todd, you may not see something next year or the year after, but say 5 years from now, it will become so embedded in the organization that you know, you'll just be able to do more with the folks out there with that type of technology.
I mean, I think some I was gonna say too, added to this, these technologies are going to create new, you know, transform behaviors in how we work, right? It's going to change the fact that people were so used to people, someone traveling out to help them do something or help them make a decision. You know, now they don't have to, you know, and I think the businesses have started to recognize that, and it's going to be interesting to provide those right tools to sustain that, like the HoloLens, as you mentioned, Todd.
So
that was one
Go ahead,
point
Jane.
that Pietro Vasecchi was making, was that the actual experts or of the use of the technology is operations, and to engage them properly and actually deliver something they can use and get that feedback is key.
Yeah, I just there's something I'm going to talk about on Wednesday morning, but it's just the, you know, if ever that phrase necessity is the mother of invention. I mean, that is over and over and over again. You see it this year. So let's talk a little bit about, Keith, you raised the point of sometimes people are uncomfortable with change, and it may take some time to get folks there. Can you talk about just really the whole mental process of people coming to grips with, you know, this pandemic, and what it's going to do to them, not just in the short term, but the long term, around, you know, ideas of job security and what people are used to doing? Because there was a lot of apprehension. I heard from that, you know, from folks really early on who were just in a bit of a panic around what's going on, how do we deal with this, what do you know? Can you just talk a little bit about that, and maybe how you dealt with it?
Yeah, Mike, and it varied too. It varied from site to site, and it varied from even within our larger sites. It varied to the degree of acceptance. I mean, take for example, you know, one of our sites in Geismar, and they were You had some shifts that were reluctant to use anything we had set up. And hopefully I don't offend anybody, but I mean, that typically would come from shifts that are more toward the more senior operations crews. And then you had some shifts that were wanting more and more. And so you had a kind of a differentiator with the actual operations people in the field as far as utilizing what we set up to give them some assistance. And you deal with a lot of different preferences. Okay, we talked about HoloLens and that kind of support. We had some operators that don't really want to use HoloLens. They feel like it's a safety risk for them, but they would prefer having the tablet with the camera on a tablet be able to provide them with a video of the actual equipment in the field to some expert sitting somewhere. And so, one of the things we tried to do to kind of accommodate some of the resistance, and of course there was always, I'll talk last point on the resistance completely from introducing technology, but we tried to have the flexibility to give, a particular operating crew, a particular site, what they desired from this. I mean, there's some plants, even up to the production management people, that said, no, we'll give the clearances. We want, the technical people, we want them boots on the ground in the plant looking at this and fixing it. We don't want anything remote. And so you got varying degrees of what they want to be able to accomplish during such thing as a pandemic. So some of them were willing to go out from an administrative side and approve somebody coming out to the site. Others were like, give me as much technology as you can so I can keep everybody home and safe and still be able to, troubleshoot my production units. And so we tried to be very flexible in what we did to meet those different needs. And we tried to do it from a higher level. When you're talking about, 90 something sites across the region, you're trying to do a balance, and that becomes an administrative management issue right there. But I think it was more of trying to be flexible and more of trying to give them whatever tools they were willing to use to provide that assistance. And so we did many different variations. Again, a lot of them, like I'd like to redo them, but it was just a onset of many different types of solutions, I guess, during the pandemic.
Yeah. So Pietro, can you jump in, because you actually raised the point of where the expertise lies? Did you see any, you weigh in on that point, but can you also maybe express what you saw where maybe there could be some reluctance with those experts in terms of what they need to do? Love to get your opinion there.
Yeah, I mean, without entering, so can you hear me first of all?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, without entering, I cannot give too many details here, but I mean, there are specific solutions that we implement, and I mean, the experts in the technology, we bring it to the field and say, this is a solution, and there is always some resistance because it comes from people that are from outside. So that's the first resistance. But then the other resistance is that, we generally come with this, the idea that we already know everything about how this will be implemented. Whereas I learned by mistakes that it takes a lot of, it brings much more benefit if we just bring the idea and say, how would you see this? Because, believe it or not, many times there are usage of the same tool that I haven't thought about. And I can give the example for software that we implemented for a specific use. And there was 2 months later, I discovered they were using for something else, and it was brilliant. So, I mean, I cannot claim it was my idea, but it was still brilliant.
If it's brilliant, you always claim it's your idea, Pietro. Always.
That was the original plan, exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about this last point here on digital rollouts. Gustavo, if you had a question about what applications are getting ahead, if you want to unmute and ask a little more detail, are there any in particular that you're thinking about in terms of what you see as getting ahead, or you had mentioned the point, anyone with greater potential for significant solutions? you wanna unmute yourself and ask that question while you're trying to get to that. So
You
You should
Jane,
be able to
Yeah.
unmute, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Mike, I was going to say, I think the things that are getting ahead are those tools that enable collaboration or enable people to better contextualize the information, that they're receiving, or taking the data and contextualizing in a way that they can absorb it. They can, consume that information. Those are the ones that I think are jumping ahead in my world.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're seeing that as well. But also we did a pilot for the last few months at one of our sites for maintenance work, daily maintenance work, and updating the schedule. And the users really liked it because they didn't have to go in and check in anywhere. They just update, their device in the field, and is where the steps are in maintenance, and that collaboration and added productivity made a big difference.
So we got one comment from, want to make sure I get this right. Mike Hodling, if you want to unmute and ask that, or if you have an example of it, but it's really about the point you make, Brian, around pilot fragility. So what things do people stop doing?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Me?
Yep.
Okay, wait, we're in a conference room. We got major reverb inside our conference room. Yeah, I guess the question I have is that during the challenging times, I agree with all the comments around, really trying to capitalize on work that was done directly in the field and remote. I'm just kind of curious from an observation of, any common themes you have seen to where people have stopped doing. And I would share you from an ExxonMobil perspective, there are a number of areas where we were probably heavily in the innovation field that in terms of the current market, et cetera, that we've had to put on hold. I'm just kind of curious of what anybody else had seen.
And hey, Mike, I'll ask you back. What was either the question that was framed or the statement that was made that had you decide this is no longer going to be done?
Well, quite frankly, a lot of this had to do with ability to travel, ability to pilot in areas where you didn't have access. But probably more importantly, at least for our industry, it was really from a standpoint of everybody having to make very tough decisions in terms of cutting back. And from a budgetary standpoint of where we currently are, a number of what I would say high returns that we see in the future had to be sacrificed for short-term gains. And so it's just getting my head around of, were there other technologies that or deployments that folks also had to stop in terms of the pandemic.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
So from my standpoint, from a technology standpoint, we didn't stop anything, but what we did move was capital projects and maintenance turnarounds. And but we kept doing the technology work and the experimentation and deployment of that. So from my experience, I didn't see that, but perhaps it was happening. I'm just not aware of it.
I think in my world, I think where things really stopped was those one-off, being what I call the shoulder tap projects. We still had lots of shoulder taps going on, but it's really those go off and solve this one-off thing. We really started to pull things in and are continuing and to do it even better now as we've continued through this pandemic, to look at what all the problems are, to pull it all in and to find a way to more broadly solve a problem at scale. Right, get rid of all these little one-off things, because the more small implementations you put out there, site-based solutions you put out there, the harder it is to support and maintain, the more risk there is, the safety issues that come up with that, right? So really trying to pull things in and identify, is it something that is really needed to be solved at scale? That's, how we started looking at things and really stopped doing those one-offs.
No, I think, Brian, that's a good comment. I would say we echoed this similar, which was really around if it was not something that we could do at scale, it was something that was likely not to make the cut. Of course, interesting though, is that when you start doing that, now you start to get at the, hearts and minds of true innovation and transformation at the field level, right? Because a lot of good things that had returns, basically you have to say yes, but not now, right? And really just think of the broader strategic investments, or at least what we have, that are truly scalable across the fleet.
And Mike, this is Todd. I'd say the same thing. Some of the longer term stuff, we did change our capital focus on shorter term returns. So you really had to do that project prioritization to show that the enterprise can get value from this long term in order to keep working on that. But along with that, you had to show MVP steps that you were making progress, because if you weren't exactly making progress on a longer term return project, they were not likely to give you funding to keep going. So I agree.
Yeah, this is Keith, and I mean, from my point of view, and I guess airing a little dirty laundry, but in this digital rollout and in this kind of kickstart we had, it kind of changed the focus from our digitalization group prior to going into the pandemic. It was more a push of technology because we want to do digitalization, and as we went into this pandemic, it became more of what I always thought the focus should be. It's basically manufacturing coming to us saying, hey, I have this problem. Can you find something to give us a solution? So we started to actually address problems with technology rather than just pushing technology out, which is, I think, a big failure point on the whole digitalization thing, is just pushing technology out, but letting the people, letting the asset owners, the production people tell us what was the missing piece, what did they need? And I think that for me is really what is the kickstart that occurred during the pandemic, was kind of that change in focus of what we were doing as far as digital rollout.
Do you think that that's going to stick, a couple of years from now, that way of thinking?
I'm scared it's not, because even though those projects, within BASF, my organization exists there to work hand in hand with manufacturing, but there's a whole separate organization in the company called digitalization, which has a whole bunch of streams, and their focus really didn't change. The problem that happened during the pandemic is they were kind of pushed back on the back burner on some of these things they were pushing to the field that maybe operations didn't see the value in, and they turned around and said, look, this is my problem right now. Who can give me a fix? And who has a technology that can give us that fix? And so those are the things that kind of changed in the prioritization that maybe they had originally got altered. So it's going to be a challenge, to be honest, Mike, to answer your question. Within at least my company, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to see, can we continue to do this where we feed off of what manufacturing actually needs versus just going back to getting pilot projects that are going to test this new technology they found out on the market.
But it's got to have those benefits, right, to drive behaviors,
right,
and financial benefits.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I hope that this sort of mindset stays, because this is how you're successful, by taking those people with their hands closest to the process and solving their problems and then deploying that. Pushing something down, it never works, because as soon as you turn and focus on something else, the guys at the side are going to stop using it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know that, I sit there, and one of the interesting things I've heard through this rollout of our, providing that remote visibility solution is, we've had some people at higher levels say, well, we're just going to, the pandemic's going to, reduce itself, it's going to go away, and people are just going to go right back to traveling. And then, the interesting thing at the same time is we were getting all this, businesses in 2021 were all like saying, hey, we're going to reduce travel by 40 to 50% across our business. So we need to use these tools and solutions. And, meanwhile, I got, this that I'm battling to help make this work. The guy's like, well, we really don't want to put the investment in, the time in, or resource it appropriately, because, it's just going to go away. But this is the stuff where you need where we, to solve for this, right? We kept putting back and saying, here's all the business leaders, here's the calls we're sitting on, here's us, engage with us in these meetings and calls, and you're going to see that this is all pull, right? This isn't us pushing anything down. They're pulling, and they're pulling more and more and more. And therefore, you need to invest your resources and time to help make this sustainable, right? And this is the business value. This is the benefit, and the organizational direction. That's the pieces where we, have to keep maintaining that communication and communicating that out, right, to help drive that sustained the value, to sustained energy to keep it going forward.
Yeah. So Mr. Carroll, it looks like Mike Carroll raised your hand there. I think you're unmuted.
Yeah. So I think Brian Pearlstein said some pretty good things. When this first happened to us, the very first thing we did was we looked at it and said, all right, what are those things we're going to do that we're not going to come back from? And we made a list of those things. And out of that list, among those things was turn off all the badges, right? And when you turn off all the badges of facilities, except for the people that absolutely have to be there, you better go figure out a lot of things. And we went and figured out a bunch of things that we had to go do that actually made us significantly better. And when I mean significantly better, I mean productivity up over 20%, 25%, in some cases way better than that. And all because we all of a sudden had to do something significantly better. And out of that, what happened was we're not spending less capital. We're spending more capital because it shined a light on the things that said, you can go feel disadvantaged and you can go feel sorry for yourself, right? Because you're disadvantaged in certain ways, or you can go use this as an opportunity to completely remake yourself because you have a disadvantage and learn how to go be good at something else that when your competition is contracting in an area because they're concerned, you go learn to be great. And that's the mentality we took.
Yeah, it's one of those things where there's going to be apprehension associated with that, but also opportunity. And it's, where do people as individuals fall down on that? Do they really approach it and say, okay, that's great for me, this is an opportunity, or do people, default to that scares me? There's a lot of human nature in that.
It takes strength of leadership to go do those things where you have to find out what it is you need to go be good at.
Yeah.
And in that opportunity, that's exactly what we did.
Yeah.
So that focus that Brian Pearlstein talks about is exactly what works.
So it looks like Marty Gonzalez, I think you're unmuted there. You want to step in?
Yeah. So, talk about necessity being the mother of invention. I'm with BP, and we had already announced a major reorg even before the pandemic hit. So that just really accelerated our timeline. And we've now broken down. We don't have upstream and downstream anymore. I'm on a team now where one of my counterparts came from subsurface, another one came from wells, somebody came from upstream production, and we're looking for commonalities and trying to reconcile between all these digital projects. Pick standard ways of working, and there are actually quite a few similarities. We're doing a lot of digital twin stuff with 3D, and if you're replacing a piece of pipe out in the field, it almost doesn't matter if it's on a rig or out in a refinery. So that's one way that we're sort of rationalizing these things. But the other comment I wanted to make is that we have made some mistakes putting something in the field. We had something with RealWare that just didn't hit, like we were talking about earlier. The operators just didn't want to use it. So what we've done more and more is once you prove that the tech works and you think it can handle, it might be a solution to this idea somebody has. We try to test it within real work processes with real users, and sometimes they'll completely make you rethink the problem that you think you're solving, and the solution will change drastically. For example, we had started doing sort of this sexy AI thing out at the refineries. We can help operators sift through all the instructions that the engineers give to them. And as we started working with operators and with engineers in the plants, they said, no, you want to focus on the interface, and you want to make it streamlined so you can put in your rules and your instructions as quickly as possible and worry about the fancy AI later. So we changed the direction of the project, and that's actually working. They're getting value out of that now. We can always come back to the fancy thing later.
So Marty, just you raised the point that you took something that Mike Carroll had mentioned. You took a bunch of people that typically would have not been working together and they collaborated. Can you talk to how, that must have been both opportunity and apprehension in terms of that way of working. How did it play out for you and the team you worked with?
We're still figuring that out, to be perfectly honest. And the trick is that because we all come from different backgrounds, this is actually our strength, right? And it's all about interfaces. So the way we're supposed to work now is within squads. So you have some parts of the organization that are entirely squad leaders, and then the rest is supposed to be sort of these little pockets of expertise, and you work together to create these products. So my team is called Intelligent Operations, and we're sort of the technology solution development arm that's connecting the folks looking at the future techie stuff with the users that are out in the field. But we've created another interface called BP Solutions, where those guys are supposed to interface directly with the users, and they're sort of front facing to production and operations. But as far as how we're learning to work together, really everybody brings their perspective in. Sometimes you're talking past each other, right? As you would expect. I think that's what you're getting at. You have to learn to have a common language, and it's not really that easy. Ultimately, you end up having to draw a lot of pictures, bring in a lot of information for people, and it takes time.
Yeah, well, fair enough. I think all change does, for sure. So I think we've got to wrap our conversation at this point. It's been a very good and very lively one. Brian and Jane, thank you as always for getting this kick started. This sounds like it's a pretty on point topic, so we may want to consider that. I think this might be, resiliency might be one of the topics that you could choose from in our priority voting for the year. Because maybe we want to come back and revisit that. If not, just, if you are interested in carrying on the conversation, enter it into the other screen in the voting process. But at this point, I want to turn it back to, I believe, Mark, though I'm not positive. So Mark or Greg, if you want to proceed to the next part of the meeting, that'd be great.
Mark, can you please unmute yourself?
Sure, that would be a great idea, wouldn't it? So anyway, Mike is just like Mike said, we'll move into the research topics for the next year. Would love to have your input. That same QR code and web link will take you to the form that has not only the nominations, but also the nominations for topics. And
actually, Mark, there are two different QR codes, so be careful about that.
Oh, well, they take you to the same form.
No.
Okay, well, so let me share. I'm going to share the web page, the survey, and this is your information. There you go. That's why I'm confused. So you enter your information at the top of the screen. Second question is the topic that is most important to you. And the third question are what other topics that you are interested in. So you select what those are, and maybe there's still something else you want to put on there. You can do that as well.
And there's resilience, Mark. And I did add I added the link in the chat.
Okay, so
you that are having difficulty with the QR code.
Yeah, which is what I had, but regardless.
And can you go back to the QR code, Mark? I'm getting somebody asking if you could put that back into the screen.
Yeah,
so people
just a moment. Should be that one. You see it?
Yes, that's good.
All right.
So leave that up for a couple minutes and let people find it and take advantage of that.
And hey, while they're doing that, I am going to, Brian Perlstein, you can shamelessly plug your session coming up this week, because I do believe it's about resilience, correct? Can you share with the group when that is?
I can come off mute here. Yeah, I mean, as a bunch of us are speaking this week, but you know, there's, I know I have my session on Thursday. I believe it's right around 12 o'clock. It's the remote worker session led by Janice. You know, and can talk a little bit more about, you know, how do we keep moving things moving forward and keep our manufacturing operations going during the pandemic.
Great place to continue our panel conversation.
Okay. And I think,
So Mark,
yes,
I'm not seeing any responses yet, so I just wonder what's happening. Is anybody having trouble with this, or is this working?
It's fine. I just need a second to fill it out.
Oh, here we go. All right, they're starting to come in. It's there's a slight delay here, so
It's working.
all right, thanks. We had to kind of try a couple different things to get a tool that works reasonably well. This works okay, but it's a little slow. But what we'll do in a couple minutes here is I can share the results that we've gotten so far, and then they'll continue to come in for a little while.
okay.
So we're starting to get a pattern here. Let's just see. And thanks for contributing, everybody. So I'll share my screen now, and then I can refresh it a little bit, a couple of times. Let's see. Okay, so here we are. Let me do this one more time. All right, so we're just starting to get, we've got 30 responses so far. They're still trickling in. But just to get a sense of this, and we'll leave this open for some time. But you know, we're going to try to put a priority on the data we collect today. So machine learning is top of the list. This seems to be at top of the list quite a few years now. Digital twins, digital transformation, connected workers, IT tech for OT, data automation and management, autonomous plants. So these are some of the things that are coming in right at the top: connected assets, remote workers. Okay, good. So that's a good, just gives you a sense of how this is going. Let's see if I can collect a few more here as they come in. Yeah, that's better. So, all right, so that changed the order slightly, but as you can see, the top three: digital twins, digital transformation, and machine learning and analytics are all hot topics for us this year again. So we're going to continue to focus on those things. While I've got you all here, this one I just want to explore a little bit. This notion of data automation and management. If any, you know, I welcome a comment or discussion about any particular issues that that you'd like us to focus on in this area, because this is always an interesting topic. So if anybody wants to jump in and talk about that, that would be
Greg, Mike Hodling wanted to weigh in, I think, on maybe breaking down digital twins into some separate topics. Mike, if you want to, you can certainly unmute, and if you had any ideas there, that would be helpful.
Hey, Mike, this is Michael. So I just wanted to build off of the workshop that we had last year. And I think, you know, at least my 2 cents is that making sure we get the right folks for the right discussion, we probably need to be thinking about breaking the word digital twin into the 2 or 3 components that was consistent with the definitions we used during that workshop. Because otherwise I'm afraid we'll end up kind of going around in circle as each participant is trying to redefine digital twin in terms of finding opportunities to collaborate.
Yep, makes sense.
Yep, thanks. Good comment. And we did have two web meetings this year focused on digital twins, and we took two different slants on that. I think consistent with that workshop. So with the workshop, we had three main focus areas on that, and it's still a hot topic. So I think that's a good comment, and we can take a look at that. Those are available. If you didn't get a chance to see them, if you'd like to view those meetings, they're available on our DTC site. So you can just find them there and take a listen. If you have trouble with that, just let us know. We'll help you figure it out. Again, to the other question, data automation and management, any thoughts about that? What in particular we'd like to focus on, you'd like us to focus on there would be helpful. So if you don't want to share it today or don't have any ideas, but would like to send that along, please do so. Thanks.
Hi, Greg. This is Jesus Flores here from Lindy. I think in terms of data automation, one of the needs that we have seen is really data collection at very high speeds. For instance, for vibration analysis, we have specific data collectors and databases set up specifically for certain applications, but now we are looking more into really more conscious and systematic onboarding of thousands of machines, right? So that would be at least something interesting from our side.
Okay, thanks. And did I break something? Okay.
Hey, Greg, we keep highlighting digital transformation, and I really get concerned when we talk, like, what is digital transformation? There's so much to digital transformation. So how, what's one topic on digital transformation? I mean, every one of these topics down here is part of digital transformation. I mean,
I think that's a fair comment. So we'll continue to focus on probably these subtopics. The digital transformation topic itself, well, we still get some queries about that too. So maybe we'll think about how to just approach the broad problem of digital transformation. Maybe we can think of having a web meeting just focused on that, because you're right, it is such a huge topic there. Every one of these things is a part of it. And, probably every aspect of your organizations are part of it too. It's just a question of where do you start and what technologies do you use and how do you prioritize and how do you, focus on serving up what your customers need and what your business needs. And it's a big topic.
Yeah.
So
the last thing's technologies, though.
What's that?
The last thing's technologies. It's what's the
exactly.
questions, right? Yeah.
Often, yeah. Well, not for everybody. You'd be surprised how many people still start there.
Yeah, it's interesting, Brian, because this year is what gave people the focus on how to transform, and we've talked about it today. But that still was such a problem for people, which is understanding, how do you determine the correct strategy, which then drives all of the change that needs to occur. That's still, it's just so challenging for people.
All right, then. I think we can move on to the next part of our agenda. Thanks everybody for voting on your topics. And we didn't look at in this particular chart, we haven't looked at the individual topics you may have selected, but we'll take a look at those carefully as well. Okay. All right, let me stop sharing. Okay, good. What's Mark? I think you're next on the agenda, or am I?
Well, you can do it. I mean, it's basically the closing remarks.
Oh, Oh, we've reached that part of the meeting then. All right. Let me just get a couple, share my screen one more time. Okay. All right. So yeah, I think it is time for some closing remarks. And so first of all, before we get before I say a few words, I just want to open up thank our steering committee members who participated today, and thank our panelists for helping drive an interesting discussion forward today. Any closing remarks from any of the steering committee members? This would be a good time. So I'm just going to open it up for you to do so if you would like to right now. Brian, I think you wanted to talk about some session or something.
No, he had covered that.
Okay. All right then. Well, with that, thanks everybody for coming today. We're going to put a recording of this meeting in our library, and we'll provide a summary as well. Of course, we're going to use the topic results to guide our online and regional meetings as we can start doing those again. We're all looking forward to it. A couple of other points, we did get some nominations for the steering committee, so thank you for that. We'll take a look at those carefully and follow the voting process that we outlined earlier. If you're thinking about maybe you'd be interested in doing this, but you're not sure and you'd like to talk to us about it, just please reach out to any one of us and we'd be happy to talk further with you about it. So I'd encourage you to do that if you're not on the fence about it.
And hey, Greg, just to mention the email for the nomination process will go out to the entire DTC membership on February 10th. So if somebody does want to act on it that they didn't get to do that today, you'll still have that chance on the 10th. So look out for that email.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. We will keep the topic voting open for some time, and we'll also follow up with that with an outreach to our membership in a couple of different ways over the near future. So, we expect to get a little more input on that. So that link that you've seen today will still work for some time. So we'll keep that open and we'll let you know. Join us for our monthly meetings. The next one is, as we mentioned earlier, Tuesday, March 9th, succeeding with IT/OT organizational convergence. So there's an ongoing theme that's been only gathering steam recently. And with that, thanks for coming in. Please enjoy the forum. There are a lot of interesting topics, a lot of sessions. We're looking forward to doing it. We've gotten some good speakers and some good content. So please check it out. And again, if you have any trouble, let any of us know. There's a keynote tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So that would be a good place to start if you aren't attending one of the sponsored breakfasts or something. So look forward to that. And again, thank you very much for joining us. And thanks for being part of the Digital Transformation Council. Thanks, everybody.